Unsanctioned is just around the corner. It's gonna be released at the end of this month, the 29th of February. And with that, they're gonna reprint a whole bunch of cards from the previous unsets, as well as printing new Silverboard cards. And they're going for something of a boxing theme. The last time we had a set release from the unset, the EDH committee actually legalized all Silverboard cards for 1 month. It was temporary, but it was definitely an experience. Now, EDH is a social format, and that means that your playgroup is of course allowed to tweak and change the rules as long as everyone is agreeing. So for example, if the EDH committee allows all Silverboard cards for 1 month again, your playgroup could easily say no. I actually think that's what we are gonna do in my competitive playgroup that I'm playing in. But if you think that was an amazing experience and you wanna do it again, and the EDH committee don't actually allow the Silverboard cards, your playgroup could of course allow them together as long as everyone is agreeing. Remember, communication is key. I actually played against one Silverboard card during that month. It was the Cramped Bunker. You are basically going to move cards touching that card without touching other cards. And I ended up scooping that game because I didn't fully understand how we are going to execute this card. It basically became a talk within the group of how we are going to execute that card. And I guess I am not the target audience for these kinds of effects. But in the end, we are all different, and I hope there's someone out there that enjoys these things. But there are actually Silverboard cards out there that I enjoy. For example, Jack in the Mox. There's no question of how we are going to execute this card. We simply roll a die and we discover the result. So this is a card I could actually even see myself play in casual EDH. I don't want this to be legal in competitive EDH for another reason, the rolling die reason. You see, rolling a die means it's a luck factor, and I don't like luck factor. That's bad for competitive gameplay. But I have actually found a whole bunch of different Silverboard cards that I could personally agree upon playing against or with. They simply fulfill 2 different criteria. Criteria number 1, that from only the text on the card, we immediately understand and know how we're going to play with it and execute that specific card and how it's going to interact with other cards. Criteria number 2, it's not random luck rolling a die or any other weird gimmicky thing, but also it's not overpowerly broken. It shouldn't see a ban. There are actually some Silverboard cards that are busted. So here is my list of top 15 cards that I think could be legal from the unset. Number 15. Organ Harvest, 1 black mana sorcery. You and your teammates may sacrifice any number of creatures. You will add 2 black mana to your mana pool equal to the amount of creatures sacrificed this way. Here we could discuss teammates. However, in a 4-player pod game, all of your 3 opponents are opponents, and you can't change that no matter what you do. For example, with the cardristic study, you can't change any one of the 3 opponents into an ally, no matter what you do. It is also very similar to the wording of the card Mindblade Render, that is both functional in 1v1 as well as in team versus team. So listen to the text. Whenever your opponents are dealt combat damage, if any of that damage was dealt by a warrior, you will lose a life and you will draw a card. This is going to function in both 1v1 as your warrior is attacking your opponent and you draw a card. In team games, your teammate is attacking your opponents, and because your teammate warrior attacked and dealt damage, your Mindblade Render will trigger and draw a card. So I actually think that Organ Harvest is a functional card. We know how we are going to execute it. And I also think that the card would be good in cEDH. For example, the Young Dragon would love it. Number 14. Booster Tutor. Really cool name. 1 black mana instant. open a sealed Magic the Gathering booster and pick one card from that booster and send the rest away. And when a new game begins, that card you picked will also go away. This card is functional as long as you're not opening a booster from an unset. One could also make the argument that you shouldn't be allowed to open boosters from any set that has one or more cards in that set that are banned in the EDH format. I'm actually fine if you open a booster and grab a card that is banned in the EDH format. You were lucky and you probably haven't built your deck around that card either. But how good would this card actually be? I mean, drawing a random card from your deck is usually better than grabbing a card from outside the deck. Remember this. With every set that Wizard of the Coast release, there is usually around 4 cards in it that are cEDH viable, so the chance of you grabbing one of those 4 is really low. Sure, there are some sets that have maybe 8 cards or so that are cEDH viable, but still that's a very bad result. However, when you're looking at 15 cards, you're looking at a huge variety of different options, so it's a really big impulse. And within all those 15 options, your chance of getting a counterspell, getting a removal, getting a cardable grind, so there should be an option within these 15 that is something that you're looking for. But I don't think anyone is actually going to play this card, except those that are addicted to opening boosters, because this is, in theory, the most expensive card in the entire Magic the Gathering. It might actually challenge Black Lotus if you play with this card regularly. You know what? I actually have a question for you. If you calculate all the boosters that you've bought in your entire lifetime of Magic the Gathering, would those actually equal the same price to a Black Lotus? Number 13. Glee Max. This is a really expensive card in mana. It's 100,000 mana, legendary artifact, and you choose all targets for all spells and abilities. The ultimate power. But there's nothing strange and gimmicky and weird with Glee Max. It's in fact very similar to a misdirect. You could basically say that whenever someone casts anything or put any ability on the stack, you will automatically cast a misdirect on that effect. So how good is this actually going to be? I mean, let's begin with the mana cost. You can't cast a thing. You don't have that amount of mana, unless you have infinite mana, but when you have infinite mana, you've pretty much won the game anyway. You could trick it into play though. With something as a tiny little goblin welder, you could basically put Glee Max into your graveyard with any form of trick, like discard effect or entomb, and then tap your goblin welder and change place, and suddenly Glee Max is in play. And I actually think casting a misdirect on every spell your opponent plays that has a target effect on it is really good and gonna be really fun too. It's not bulletproof. If a player plays something like destroy all artifacts, Glee Max is over. Number 12. Mize. I don't find anything weird with this card. This is a card they could almost actually print, even except it's gonna be pretty broken and busted, and I don't think they should legalize this. But in EDH, we are already playing so broken that this could actually be legal. I guess it could be legal in Vintage as well. While we're at it, it's 1 blue mana instant. Name a non-land card, reveal the top card of your library. If you were correct, draw 3 cards. If you haven't figured it out already, here is the Esper Fate Shifter for you. She is one of the many top deck manipulators. And there's a few other top deck manipulators that would utilize this card greatly. Sylvan Libraries and auto include in pretty much every cEDH deck. Sensei's Divining Top, the list goes on, and suddenly Mize is really good. But this card is terrible without top deck manipulation synergy, and that is actually a good point where I want this card to be legal. You see, In cEDH currently, we are mostly playing cards that are individually good, and we are ignoring synergy because we are playing a 100 card deck, so synergy is really hard. The only card we kinda synergize with are our commanders, and that's it. We don't synergize within the deck that much in general. But this card is so busted that we wanna include top deck manipulation synergy for it. It's so good that we wanna do synergy. And I think that's a good virtue, that's a good thing we wanna have in cEDH. Number 11. Now I know my ABCs. It's a 3 mana cost blue enchantment that reads: at the beginning of your upkeep, if you control permanents that together form all the 26 letters of the English alphabet from their names, you win the game. This is very simple, very easy to check. Just go over all the permanents in play, check their names, and see if you control all the English letters in the alphabet, and if that's the case, you win the game. I guess this is the first time I ever showcase a card in Russian on this channel. So here's a card, it's in Russian, and we don't know its name. We kinda know its name, so we could Google it. So one could make the argument that we can't actually allow I know my ABCs because they are cards in other languages. I don't think that's a problem, because we already look at cards for their oracle text from time to time. So if anyone would put I know my ABCs in play, and then they would put a card in Russian or any other language, Japanese, in play, we would simply go online and check the oracle text, and in this case we would actually check the English name for it, just to see if we have successfully achieved the I know my ABCs achievement quest. Number 10. Clock Nappa. It's a 5 mana cost blue creature human spy that reads: when Clock Napper enters the battlefield, choose the beginning phase, pre-combat main phase, combat phase, post-combat main phase, ending phase, and steal that phase from target player. And when that phase begins during that player's turn, you are executing that phase as if it were your turn. There is a creature that goes by the name of Emrakul the Promised End, and at first glance you might think that Clock Napper is a teeny tiny version of the Emrakul of the Promised End, but it's not. Emrakul is controlling that player's entire turn, making all decisions that player could make, while Clock Napper is basically taking that phase and you are executing that phase as if it were your turn. And depending on what phase you steal, you can do different things. For example, if you steal an opponent's combat step, that player can't go to combat, but now you could go to combat during that player's turn if you have creatures still untapped. In their main phase or post-combat main phase, you can cast spells in sorcerer speed, but the most common phase you're going to steal is the beginning phase, where you will untap and you will draw a card, while your opponent won't untap and won't draw a card. So that could actually also summarize how good this card is going to be. Basically, it could read the following: when Clock Napper enters the battlefield, when target player untaps, you will untap instead. When target player draws a card for his turn, you will draw a card for that turn instead. Number 9. Do-it-yourself Surf. This is a 6 mana cost 4/4 artifact flying cyborg angel. When do-it-yourself attacks, search your library for a card and exile that card. And this creature has all the text boxes of all cards exiled this way. This card isn't that different from Necrotic Ooze, as it would have several different text boxes on it from different cards, just like Necrotic Ooze has a lot of different activated abilities. Do-it-yourself Surf isn't that tricky to operate, and it's actually quite good. If you attack with it twice, you are probably going to win the game. When you attack the second time, you will grab Neheb the Eternal, and from here you have infinite combat steps. Number 8. Favourable Blessing. When this comes into play, you would either choose Flavorable or Bland, or actually you would choose flavor text or no flavor text. Whenever a creature comes into play under your control, with or without a flavor text, depending on what you've chosen, you will draw a card. Most creatures actually have a flavor text, so it could actually read, whenever a creature comes into play, draw a card, and that's pretty busted for a 2-mana cost enchantment. But for cards to be cEDH viable, they have to be really busted. So I think this is a card that is fine. And it's not that hard to execute either. The creature has a flavor text, or it doesn't, and then it's settled. Or is it? Here is a copy of Avid Mind Sensor with no flavor text whatsoever. And here we suddenly have another version of Avid Mind Sensor, this time with a flavor text. But the answer would simply be that if the specific card you put into play has a flavor text, then you would draw a card, and if it doesn't, you won't draw a card. So you would basically try to construct a deck with as many cards with flavor text or as few cards with flavor text as humanly possible. Number 7. Split Screen. It's a 4-mana cost artifact that will shuffle your entire library. Then you will separate your entire library into 4 different piles, and then you will flip the top card of each of those piles. And now you basically see the top card of 4 different libraries, and you choose from what library you will draw cards from. This is revealing information for both your opponents and yourself, but you get a lot of toolbox options from this. Alright, so Split Screen is a little bit weird, but it's not impossible to actually execute it. For example, if Ashok would target you, then you would choose which of your 4 libraries to exile from. However, it's not actually busted or anything, but it's pretty cool, and it's actually playable. It is cEDH viable. Toolboxing, choosing what card you're gonna draw, is actually pretty decent. Number 6. Timmy the Power Gamer! This is a reprint. And for 4 mana, you may put a creature card from your hand onto the battlefield. There is nothing strange with this effect at all. There are so many other cards that are already doing this in a much better efficient way than Timmy. However, Timmy is a legendary, so you could actually run him as your commander. Number 5. Surgeon, not general but commander. 4 mana cost, green, legendary creature. He's a wombat bat chameleon. Whenever you augment, enchant or mutate, I would like to mention that mutate is a keyword that doesn't exist yet, so we don't know actually what mutate does. So that means if mutate does something that is absolutely wonky and weird, then he would disappear from my list. But whenever you do anything of these 3 things, you will draw a card. But you can also tap this thing. I don't know what this is, so let's call it a thing, for white, black, red, blue or green mana. Someone who is really clever at this game could basically just point out that the creature should tap for any mana of any color of your choosing. However, someone who is a little bit more clever at this game would point out that this creature would only have the color identity of green in that case, and the designers of this creature wanted it to have the color identity of all 5 colors. So this is a commander with all 5 color identities that also draw cards whenever you augment 2 creatures or whenever you cast an aura on a creature. Now when we look at that commander, we also have to think about all the different combinations of host and augments, but none of them are actually that wonky and weird. What's wonky and weird is the combination of putting 2 cards together and melding them together, something we actually already have. I don't know if you still remember Breselia Voice of Nightmares, that has meld. You basically put 2 specific creature cards into play, and those are flipped into this gigantic angel. And hacking the game and changing texts are also something we already have. I don't know if you know about Magical Hack. This is actually a spell we already play in a deck that goes by the name of Hackball in cEDH. If you cast Magical Hack targeting Mumirvig's text, changing it from whenever a blue creature comes into play into whenever a green creature comes into play, you will have both effects whenever you put a green creature into play. So therefore, I don't really have a problem with the existence of putting 2 cards together, fusing them into 1 creature. You could basically say that the half squirrel thing is something of an enchantment effect onto the beaver. But is it good though? Well, in this combination, whenever you put a non-token creature into play, you will untap a permanent. But also, I would like to point out that it will trigger whenever a creature comes into play, not just creature under your control. In the end, I don't really know how strong you could build him. This isn't something I've been theorizing because I don't think I'm going to be allowed to play it. But who knows? Maybe you could build something on a semi-competitive level around this something. Number 4. Staying Power, a 3-mana cost white enchantment that reads, as long as Staying Power is in play until end of turn and this turn, effects don't end. But it's also going to keep the Yawgmoth's will effect in action for the entire game. This isn't actually always good. You see, your graveyard is going to be empty eventually, and then staying in power is actually bad. But this is affecting your opponents as well in a negative and positive effect, so it's a little bit weird if the card is good or bad. You see, if an opponent cast Yawgmoth's Will and Staying in Power is in play for the rest of the game, they have a rest in peace effect on them. Number 3. Baron von Count, a 3-mana cost 3/3 human villain, Rakdos, legendary creature, so this could be your commander. He enters the battlefield with a 5 doom count. Whenever you cast a spell with the indicated number, which would be 5 for the first time, in the mana cost, the text box, or the power or toughness, move the doom counter from 1 step to the left, which will go from 5 to 4. Whenever the doom count moves from 1 outside, it goes back to 5, and you may destroy target player. If you would build this guy as your commander, which you could, you would basically build a control deck that is trying to make sure that you don't lose the game to various different combo effects, and then you would try to kill your opponents one by one by simply achieving the doom count condition, which is actually really tricky. You would build your deck in order so that every card is able to successfully move the doom counter regardless of what spell you play. In my personal opinion, it's not that tricky to execute this effect. You simply look at each individual card that you cast and see if it fulfills the condition. In the end, this would be something of a semi-competitive deck. You see, this guy doesn't draw cards. Winning this way is rather slow, but it is possible. Number 2. Juryrigg Combo player, a 2-mana cost, 2 generic, a total of 4, human gamer, a 1/1. For 4 mana, you may search your library for a card and put that card into your hand and then shuffle your library. Do I actually need to explain this anymore? I mean, executing this thing is simple. It's a 4 mana cost 1/1. 4 mana, search a library for a card and shuffle. That's simple. There's no wonky, no crazy. It's simple, straightforward, easy to execute, and he's great. You can basically tutor infinitely. If you gain infinite mana with the guy, you win the game. Number 1, the final one, my favorite one. Head of Sneak. A 3-mana cost, Demir, black, blue, and 1 generic, a 2/3 human spy legendary creature. So this could be a Demir commander. The Head of Sneak can't be blocked by creatures with flavored text. That is something we already talked about. For a black and a blue and a 2 generic, a total of 4, you will permanently steal target creature's text box. That creature will lose all flavor text and all rules, and this creature, the Head of Sneak, will gain all that text. Executing this effect isn't that hard. It's very similar to Necrotic Ooze that has a lot of different effects on it that will then combine into some form of combo, and the Head of Sneak could steal a lot of effects and become a really superhero grindy monster that can do a lot of different things. But this is interaction against combo creatures and other cool effects as well. For example, you could remove the effect from a Dark Confidant from an opponent's creature and you would gain that effect yourself. This is both interacting with your opponent and gaining value on the same time, and it's not hard to execute this. If an opponent has an Aven Mind Sensor in play and you are unable to win the game because that Aven Mind Sensor is making it impossible for you to search for your combo, you could remove the text from that bird in the last opponent's end step, then you would have that text. Now you would be interacting with your opponents the same way, preventing players from searching while you are now able to search your deck. The Head of Sneak is truly busted. The ability to interact and gain value at the same time is amazing. But it's rather tricky to assemble combos with this card. You would have to steal and combine different effects from different cards to assemble a combo creature that will basically tap and untap itself and do all sorts of things. It is possible, but the amount of mana requiring to do that is really tricky. So in the end, this is a control card, making sure you are interacting with your opponents and still grinding value. To understand this card better, I think this Simic Planeswalker is a good example to look at. For +1, you will transform one of your opponent's creature into a free elk, basically Bambi. And that creature will now lose all abilities. That is very similar to the Head of Sneak's ability. But the difference here is that you will gain that ability and then you could utilize that ability later. And that is an upside compared to Uku. However, in Uku's case, you don't have to pay the mana for it, so you could basically do it immediately for only 3 mana, somewhere turn 2 or turn 3. So Uku is faster, but weaker. I hope you enjoyed my list. Now I want to hear from you. What do you think? Are there any cards that are silverboarded that should be legal? Or are all of them horribly wrong for this game? Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed the video. If you like what I do and you wanna support me, consider sharing my videos or even checking out my Patreon page. Also, purchasing cards from the TCG Players website using the affiliate link down below will also help the channel grow. So a big thank you to all of you.